Imagine sitting on the same tractor your grandfather once drove, on the same soil your family has worked for generations. The air smells of harvest. The fields are ready. The hum of machinery should mark another successful season. But instead of selling your crops, you're sitting still, watching markets collapse, prices fall, and opportunities vanish overseas. That's the position many American soybean farmers found themselves in this year, wondering how things went so wrong, so fast. This story begins with a crop that has long symbolized the strength of American agriculture: soybeans. For decades, the United States has stood among the world's largest producers, Illinois leading the way. Farmers could count on a steady global demand, especially from China, which imported millions of metric tons of American soybeans every year. It was a dependable partnership, one that kept farms running and rural economies alive. But this year, that relationship cracked. Trade tensions, new tariffs, and shifting global alliances disrupted the fragile balance farmers had come to rely on. In response to U.S. trade actions, China turned elsewhere, to South America, to Argentina and Brazil. Overnight, the dependable buyer that once absorbed a third of America's soybean exports was gone. The impact was immediate and deeply felt across America's heartland. One farmer, John Bartman from Illinois, captured the moment in a public discussion hosted by the Democratic National Committee. Sitting on his family's tractor, he spoke with the quiet frustration so many farmers share. His family had weathered hard times before, but this, he said, was different. This was a crisis of human making, the result of policies and decisions that shattered markets and left farmers without buyers. He compared it to the farm struggles of the 1980s, a time still remembered by countless rural families. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, major political and economic moves were unfolding. Reports emerged that China had purchased roughly 7 million metric tons of soybeans from Argentina, a deal made possible when Argentina suspended certain export taxes. The timing drew attention. It came as U.S. and Argentine leaders met at the United Nations, and just before America announced a large financial package to stabilize Argentina's economy. For farmers back home, the optics were unsettling. They watched billions discussed abroad while their own crops sat unsold. Farmers and political leaders saw these developments through very different lenses. Some called them part of a broader international strategy. Others wondered if American agriculture had simply been left behind. Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, himself from one of the top soybean producing states, called it a ridiculous trade war, arguing that tariff policies were putting family farms at risk. Representative Sharice Davids of Kansas agreed that while tariffs can sometimes serve a purpose, they must be applied carefully, not unpredictably. She pointed to a growing wave of farm bankruptcies across parts of the Midwest, calling the current approach a recipe for chaos and uncertainty. These voices reveal a larger truth. Global decisions don't stay global for long. They reach deep into small towns, family kitchens, and fields that have fed this nation for generations. Trade wars might sound abstract on paper, but for farmers, they decide whether bills get paid and whether farms survive another season. That tension between large-scale politics and day-to-day survival is what makes this story so emotional and so urgent. Midway through the harvest season, President Trump announced additional tariffs on Chinese imports, doubling existing rates, a 100% increase. Markets reacted instantly, plunging, then rebounding, as investors speculated on whether the escalation would stick. Analysts even coined a phrase, "Trump always chickens out," suggesting that many expected another sudden reversal. But for farmers, that kind of volatility is not a game. A single statement can shift commodity prices overnight. And when your livelihood depends on those prices, uncertainty is the cruelest forecast of all. Yet beneath all the noise, one truth remains painfully clear. Farmers don't just need bailouts, They need markets. John Bartman put it bluntly. A bailout is like putting a band-aid on a bullet wound. His words weren't partisan, they were practical. Government aid can help for a moment, but it doesn't rebuild trust or reopen lost trade routes. Once a buyer switches suppliers, winning them back can take years. If you're finding this story insightful, take a moment to support the channel. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. It helps us bring you more detailed, balanced stories that connect global decisions to real-world lives. Now, let's step back and ask, how do we get here? When the United States first imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, the goal was clear: to pressure Beijing over trade imbalances and intellectual property disputes. China responded with counter-tariffs, including heavy duties on American soybeans. That tit-for-tat escalation quickly created winners and losers. South American producers stepped in to fill the void, expanding exports while U.S. farmers faced stockpiles and plunging prices. Some economists argue that this short-term pain could lead to long-term fairness in trade. But for farmers, long-term doesn't pay this month's bills. Meanwhile, the competition only grew sharper. Brazil and Argentina seized the moment, expanding infrastructure, building ports, rail lines, and storage hubs to handle their new export demand. With help from international investment, they reshaped the global supply chain. And once those systems take root, they rarely move back. Inside the United States, debate rages over how to protect farmers from future shocks. Some call for greater investment in domestic processing, turning soybeans into biodiesel or plant-based protein, reducing dependence on exports. Others push for new trade deals across Southeast Asia and Africa. Different solutions, but one shared theme: the need to adapt fast in a changing world. And beyond the economics lies the human story. In small towns, local banks, equipment dealers, and schools all depend on farm income. When revenue drops, the effects ripple outward. Fewer store purchases, delayed equipment upgrades, growing anxiety about whether the next generation will even stay in agriculture. Farming isn't just an occupation, it's an identity, a legacy. Losing that stability can feel like losing part of a community's soul. The emotional toll is real. Many farmers describe sleepless nights, caught between unpredictable weather and even more unpredictable policy. Farm organizations have begun offering mental health hotlines and financial counseling, recognizing that the weight of uncertainty can lead to despair. It's not the kind of story that makes headlines, but it's the one that defines what market disruption truly means in human terms. Step back, and a pattern emerges. Each decision made in Washington or Beijing reverberates through the fields of Illinois, Iowa, and Kansas. Each policy shift changes the future of thousands of families, who measure success not in political wins, but in bushels and yields. The gap between policymakers and producers is more than distance. It's emotional, cultural, human. And in that gap, this story finds its power. Recent statements from administration officials hint that new trade talks could be coming. Analysts say they may aim to de-escalate tariffs and stabilize markets. But farmers have heard such promises before, and their skepticism runs deep. They've seen hope rise and fall with each announcement. Diplomats can wait. Farmers cannot. For them, time itself becomes the enemy. To many observers, this isn't about politics, it's about predictability. Farmers can endure droughts, pests, and price swings. What they can't endure is constant uncertainty. Stability allows growth. Uncertainty stops it cold. As one farmer said simply, "We can't harvest politics, we can only harvest crops." Through all of this, one truth echoes again and again. Global trade is not a zero-sum game. When one market closes, another opens. When one nation hesitates, another steps forward. In today's world, economic leadership requires as much cooperation as competition. And the soybean story, this story becomes a lesson in just how interconnected our world truly is. What happens next depends on whether leaders can rebuild trust with both farmers and trade partners. Restoring lost markets will take time, but consistent communication and steady policy can start that healing. Economists agree. Confidence grows when surprises shrink. And for everyone following this story, remember, behind every trade headline lies a chain of real people. Farmers, truck drivers, port workers, families. The food on your table is tied to their work. When one part of that chain breaks, the rest feels it too. As this season ends, many farmers still hold hope. Hope that diplomacy and stability will restore balance. They don't want handouts. They want markets. They want to sell what they grow, to be treated not as pawns in a trade war, but as the backbone of American life. That's the deeper meaning of this story. It's not just about soybeans or tariffs. It's about how policy ripples through human lives, how international decisions shape small-town futures, and how resilience, though tested again and again, continues to define America's farmers. So the next time you see a headline about tariffs or trade, remember the farmer on that old tractor, waiting for markets to open again. His story represents thousands like him, men and women whose livelihoods depend on cooperation, on leadership, and on the belief that their work still matters in a changing world. And if you want to keep exploring stories like this, stories that reveal how global choices shape everyday lives, make sure you're subscribed and stay tuned. More stories are on the way, stories that connect us all, and remind us that understanding those connections is the first step toward a more stable and fair future.